Welcome to the Creative Industry Insight podcast, a podcast that looks at various roles in the creative world. I'm your host, Bobby. Today's guest, fight arranger Rob Locke, joins us to talk about their work on polite society. Please be warned, there are heavy spoilers in this episode, so sit back and relax as we jump into conversation with Rob. Hi, Rob. Thanks for joining me today.
Hi, good to see you, Rob.
I was waiting for the first time, like having a bit of a Rob back and forth with each other. I think this might be a first with the same namesake, so hopefully people don't get too confused with which Rob is talking.
Okay.
But I think as soon if they hear my voice saying that I did a backflip, I think people will be like, "That is definitely a lie."
Okay.
We're here to talk about Polite Society, where you were the fight coordinator on it. I saw the film last week, really enjoyed it. It's
Cool.
very much something that I kind of like didn't expect. There was a lot of zigging and zagging in the film, and it kept you on its toes. But I think one of the main aspects of the film is the stunts and the fighting in it. Before we jump into the questions, how have you found the reaction to the film?
Fantastic. I've been looking and I've had a few of my people over in a martial arts academy. They've been sending me reviews left, right, and center. I've had hundreds come through, and I'd say 90% have been really, really enjoying it and finding it so different.
Because it has those two sort of worlds collide of the old school of like with a family having a tradition of being brought up in a certain way or having certain expectations of your kids, and then your kids kind of throwing those expectations out the window and building on what they're sort of passionate about.
Absolutely. It came across like that, I think, and I think that was the plan from Nida.
How did the project come about for you?
It came with a phone call from Crispin Layfield, who's a stunt coordinator. I'd worked with him in 2012 on a TV show called Hunted with Melissa George, and he's often tried to get me into projects that involve multiple martial arts. And he spoke to Nida at length and said, "I've got the ideal guy to sort out all these fights for you." So he told me the dates, and I checked if I'd be available, and I was, and we were on.
Because if I'm right, you have, is it 10 black belts?
Yeah,
Um,
it's been many years since I've checked. It's 10, 11, something like that, yes, in different martial arts.
because you're trained in various different martial arts. When a script like this comes and you're reading how the fight scenes are played out, do you think about choosing a specific martial arts in the way that it should be presented on screen, or do you do like a mishmash of various
It,
martial arts?
it's a good question, Rob. It was really, it's just you drawing from your knowledge across the last 40 odd years and pulling together a fight technique as you run through each fight to suit that particular moment. I always ask the question of a director when they've written something like this. I haven't had many like this actually. How long do you want this fight to be? Are there fatalities? Can we break bones? Are people smashing things up? Are they going through windows? Are there more than one person attacking this individual? And ask lots and lots of significant questions. And how is it? Is it a fun element here? Do you want to laugh from the audience, or do you want them to go, "Oh, that was nasty"? I ask many, many questions, and then pull together the martial arts to suit. I mean, the dojo one with Magnus in the big karate type fight, that was very simple because I was a karate practitioner for many years and in competition fighting, and that was very simple to draw out. And whereas the other ones were like the bully fight with Nimra, or sorry, not the bully fight, the big boss fight, that had to be wild and wacky and out there, such as Matrix stroke, just crazy stuff. And so that's it, really. I drew from the different martial arts, but it wasn't specific. Like in the Nimra fight, the big boss fight, I put some Indonesian silat in there and some trapping from the Philippines, just pulling on different sources, really.
Yeah, because it's quite interesting to hear that it's not just one sort of type of fighting that gets put into it. I guess, as you said as well, when you have the first fight in the karate dojo, because to me that felt quite brutal as well. Even though it's, as you said, it's like something that you could pull on from something quite simple. The fighting does, because I guess because it has that more, not necessarily real element to it, but that sort of, I guess, where the setting is, it did that you could feel the blows and the sort of the in between the fighting between the two characters. But even when you go to the final fight, where you're right that it has that sort of mystical and fantastical element, and
Mhm.
having the including of the fighting of something like The Matrix,
Yes.
or even probably other Hong Kong style films, you still feel the punches and blows in that as well. I think just as much as the first fight. But on top of that, I think you have that more of uplifting moment of like, this is it, all or nothing. If you lose,
Absolutely. And to go back to the Magnus fight, it wasn't traditionally a karate fight, wouldn't look like that. You've got the blows, you've got people trying to score points on each other. But at that point in the script, she had a voiceover and she was very angry with men in general. And that was the tempo in that fight. So I suggested to Nida, let's have some takedowns where they land on their back and it's bam, and she was very happy with that. So we wanted it to look like there was some leg sweeps, and Priya landed on her back, Magnus landed, and then they helped each other up, and then she got angrier and angrier. So we put an extra few elements in there to make it more brutal.
I think it does show. And then on top of that, the sound design of the thudding onto the mats. It just, when you're in the cinema and with those speakers, it's just like it does reverberate more through you. With the film having so many fights as well, when you're starting off with sort of choreographing these fights, where do you begin with that? Do you and Crispin sit down and say, well, we'll do X, Y, Z, whip out your iPhone or camera phone, and then start sort of fighting your way through each other on how it would look? Or is it storyboarded and then spoken to with the director, the actors, and then sort of playing up from there?
Well, actually, I did it in order of the script. We had the Magnus fight first, then we had the bully fight with Shona in the library, and I just started mapping out the fights really in my head of roughly how long they should be after Nida's advice, and then built it from there. I built it on storyboards myself. Crispin, really, he is more the wire side of things and bringing up the elements where somebody runs up the wall or they fly through the air. That was more his forte. Mine was just building the fights from a storyboard, from the script from Nida, and just working my way through how brutal does this bully fight need to be in the library, for instance. And just mapping that out. And I'm very lucky that I have a martial arts academy. So I had several, well, I've got 400 students, but I had several very good students, and we did the iPhone thing, and we mapped out some of the fights. We threw those over to Nida. She was yes on most of the things, no on this, no, that's too long, that's too short, and we just built it and chopped it to suit and built it like that. Then, of course, when we got onto set and we started building up the rehearsals, then we had the actresses come in with their doubles, and we some things were working beautifully and some things weren't quite, so I went back to the drawing board and reset, and that was the process really.
Yeah, because I guess when you're mapping out fights and in your mind you might have something different compared to the director of how they would like things, but on top of that, there's things that they might not have thought of
Exactly.
at the same time. Because I guess in my mind, you think about fights, they have to be safe first and foremost when you have people playing them out. There's also just how they're going to look on camera, the sort of movement that you want, the what the stakes are, and how you want to sort of push the story along with the fighting as well, because that's also important in this film. The styles of like the character arc in how they're progressing as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, as we were working through the fights, it was quite interesting to get the feedback from Nida. Right from the get go, she sent me text saying, could we make this fight more like Kill Bill, Old Boy? Matrix, Haywire. And I contributed several films that I wanted her to watch, or fight scenes I sent her from films. And she was very, very open to some of that stuff. But a lot of this style, the Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, came from Nida herself. She's got a big influence. I've read quite a bit about her. She'd got a big influence in fighting when she grew up, and she trained martial arts herself. And that was quite a fun thing in the meeting at the studio. Sorry, the place in London where we met. Focus Features Films around the table. I said, Nida, you've got martial arts training, haven't you? I've never read a script where there's somebody understanding the fights so much as what you've done. And she's the one person I've met director-wise who has fight experience. So that was quite interesting. But yeah, there were many, many influences from all the aforementioned films, and we pinch from those. And isn't that the same with everything, though, that you covet things and you want to see respects paid to, like Bruce Lee? He was a heavy influence for me back in the 70s. And I wanted to see little elements of that, and Old Boy was a tremendous influence for me, that corridor scene. I wanted to see brutality in some of the fights. And I got the wordage from Nida for the Ritu fight when the sister comes in and she's very angry, and she wanted that to be as brutal as hell. And so I thought, to break that up, let's have some groundwork. There was quite a bit cut from that, actually. When we smashed through the door, there was some big throwing action the other side in the corridor, and there was some groundwork going in there, an armbar attempt, some biting more, and they had to cut it. We were running out of time that day, and so they had to cut and change and smash into the mirror. So there were quite a few bits, even in the Shona fight, the bully fight, there were quite a few bits chopped that they were running out of time.
With Lena being training to be a stunt woman, it's like I guess the arc of it's the arc of like the discipline in each fight, right?
Yes.
So as you said, with the sisters fighting, let's be honest, when you fight with your siblings, I don't know if you have any, it's like there's no rules, basically.
Right.
Because you just want to sort of tear each other apart and be like, well, I'm the youngest of three, so being the youngest, you're going to have to, and being the smallest in all of these occasions, you have to be fighting a little bit dirtier and be a little bit more violent. Whilst with the final boss fight, there's a bit more badassery, and there's more of you need to be more hyper focused on that sort of arc, in terms of you need to make sure that you know what you're doing, because you've only got one chance to beat this person.
Exactly. And in the Ritu fight, she's the older sister, and we talked her character quite a bit. And we were sort of thinking, she's got previous martial arts experience. She's the older sister, so she's going to kick her ass all over the place. And you see her smashing the cupboards, etc. Then the element came in there. Let's run up the wall. Let's jump on her and try and choke her out, nullify her, because she's got so many more skills. And that's where the hair tongs came in, and then they reset, and then it was a headbutt and a smash through the door. And it was that dominance of the sister, and she was trying to defend herself against her sister, who was coming in angry, pissed as hell, and wanted to smash the hell out of her sister, which you've made reference to, which is exactly what she did. And then, like you say, the last fight with Nimra was the big boss mentality. And then we wanted the audience to have a shock and think, oh my God, she's got skills as well. This is mental, and she's nullifying Priya's kicks to her stomach and spinning her. And we wanted that lift for the audience to look and go, oh my God, look at this at the end. They're ripping each other to bits. And there's a lot at stake. That's the future mother-in-law. And it was going, obviously it's fantasy land, but it was a lot of fun to see the audience's reaction at the end of that.
I think with that sort of, because of your paying homage to other films with its action set pieces as well, I think because you mentioned wire work as well, which I kind of want to get into. I know that wasn't your forte, but I do have a question on that a little bit later on. But when you do have that sort of, back to the sort of paying homages and building the fights up to different sort of levels, and also amping up the sort of intensity of them, because do have, like with fighting the sister and then the mother-in-law, sorry, you seem to sort of I guess the fighting kind of mixed with the schemes that it gets a little bit more and more bonkers, but then also just like, wow, like as you said, this is what's happening on the screen. And also the fighting sort of amps up more, and even the moves where you think, how are you going to stop the big boss if she's absorbing all your fight, your kicks and your punches? What we're going to do that's going to really top up with the finale?
That's it. It was building and building and building, and Nida's brief was, let's try and make that last fight the big kick-ass fight. Obviously, we had the wedding one coming after that, the wedding escape, but we wanted to put some different elements in there, something that people hadn't seen a great deal. So I put the Indonesian reference to clothing. In Indonesia, they fight with like a sari thing across them, and a knife comes in or a stick, and they take that off and they use that to defend themselves. And I wanted to do that and put some different elements into that fight and put something in there that people hadn't seen a great deal of. And then obviously she was an evil stepmother, so we were threading the needle, putting the thing around her neck. When you've stunned the opponent with so many shots, and then you can choke them out at your leisure, that's what we were trying to portray there. Oh my God, look, she's actually going to kill her and choke her out. Where the hell's this going to go? And I think that came across as something pretty nasty. And then we wanted that sort of joyous moment where Priya suddenly comes to, runs up the wall to defend that move, which was quite funky. And then, of course, it all went nasty for her because she finishes her off, gets the microphone, etc. But we put as many fantastical elements in there as we thought we could get away with, really.
With the sort of Indonesian style as well, what did you look at specifically in terms of films, and what is it that you wanted to sort of take away from those elements? Because you're mentioning about the costume side as well, because I could imagine conversations are needed with the costume designer to say, like, even though they'll have saris for the big wedding scenes, they still need to be sort of movable and flexible enough so they can fight and move in and not just sort of look great. They'll need to have a more practical element to it.
Yeah, there were some talks there. When we're talking about the Indonesian element, it wasn't so much the films, it's the training I'd done over the years. I was an apprentice under Dan Inosanto for 8 years. The guy who lives in America, who was Bruce Lee's #1 training partner, and the guy who passed over a lot of his knowledge too. And he's got a very, very, very deep influence in Silat, Indonesian martial arts, the stick, the knife, and the trapping, and all the training I'd done. It wasn't so much the films; it was the trapping elements I wanted to put in there, and the clothing, with the taking the thing off, and someone has a knife in front of you, and you use that clothing. We were going to put originally jewelry on it that was sharp. So this thing came off. It was like a 3-foot piece of material with sharp elements, and we're going to do a close up on it, and then that goes in her eyeball. But then they shied away from that in the end. That was going to go into her eye and cut her eye, and we were going somewhere with that. But it got a bit too off track a little bit there. But that was the influence from the Indonesian thing there, Rob.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because I was just sort of debating where that influence had come from. But I think as well, having that background of being under someone for so many years and learning from them, that must have been quite an experience as well. Being able to sort of be with someone who was with the greats, who was with one of the greats, but then also learn under them and be their #1 as well. It's like, wow, that's incredible.
We did we did look at the raid a little bit, and that's got Indonesian, that's Pencak Silat in there. And the bit we took from that a little bit, there was some great stuff in that film anyway, was when he physically picked somebody up, and that was a wirework piece, by the way, in the raid, and he smashes them into a concrete pillar. And we sort of looked at that when the bully fight was happening, and she runs up the wall and does a flying sidekick into Shona, and she grabbed hold of her. We originally got her grabbing, spinning around, and then smashing into the cabinet. And they said, let's make it look a bit more popcorny, a bit more comical almost. Well, let's grab her in one beat and say she's so strong, she's stuck her straight into the cabinet. So that had a little bit of influence there, the raid in that particular set piece there.
Just to sort of go back to what I was mentioning about wire work as well.
Yeah.
How does wire work affect your planning for fights? Because they're sort of they'll be there to sort of assist you, but how do you plan around that? And when you're sitting down with Crispin regarding it, what are the conversations around that as well?
Well, let's do it, for instance, the Nimra fight where she does the big matrix jump, which was about 10 foot in the air, maybe 15 foot in the air. We looked at that, and we had two great elements there. We had a great stunt double in Erin. She was incredible playing Priya for doing the backflip. She's a trained gymnast. So when she backflips away from her and does those things and stands there in a pose, we had that as originally Erin doubled in there, and then obviously Priya stands there in the pose, because that was something that Priya couldn't do. And the Nimra thing with the leap into the air, we had a very, very slow process with that. So to answer your question, I built the fight and then put in this wire element of the leap, because Nida really wanted some influences coming from the Matrix. And I said, right, we've got it brutal. Let's have that jump. And then I spoke to Crispin, went to see him, and he said, well, we could do it as a double, which is Guillemot was the double for Nimra, but we would love for the camera to see Nimra. And she at the start was terrified to jump or have these wires pick her up. It was a very slow process, what we call a slow burn. And over a period of a week, we built her up to a small leap, only like 2 or 3 foot off the floor. And because, you know, she's not 21, she was finding it quite nauseating. And she felt very, I wouldn't say uncomfortable, but she was very fearful. And so we were very, very pleased in the end. A couple of weeks before we were setting the cameras to shoot, we got her to go 10 foot in the air. And it was a fantastic achievement. She got some fantastic claps from everybody on that scene. So really, with the Shona fight, going through the door, it's just to talk to Crispin. He's saying, right, what's the space? What space do we have to pull through that door? That was Erin actually going through the door, obviously. Priya's double when Ritu kicks her through the door. That was a very complicated wire piece that runs through the door. They CGI out the wire, but it's a jerk back. But it has to go up at an angle slightly. But there was lots of elements with her head possibly smashing the top of the door as she goes through it. And just brutal as hell. So that's, again, like I said, it's Crispin's expertise. And the Shona one into the cabinet, that was a breakaway cabinet. Again, very, very, very scary movements. We had a gigantic piece in there which was chopped, where Shona had done some sort of double punch on Priya. Then they squared up again. And as Priya was walking towards us, she did an almighty front kick, which levitated Priya. And Priya was on the wire to do that into a gigantic crash mat into the wall. That was chopped eventually because it was we'd done too many fantastical elements, and they wanted to pull that one out. But I've got that on video. It was an incredible piece, that was. And Priya took that on as well as Erin. And she went back about 12 feet, maybe 15 feet, up into the air, which was like a 45-degree pull on the wire, and smashed into a crash mat that was this deep on the wall. And that, I was so proud of that. We were going to get that in, but they chopped it in the end. But does that answer your question about the wires a little bit there?
Yeah, I think it's the sort of incorporation in the fighting and what sort of goes into it, because not just so the fact is also that people are going to be so high up in the air, they also need to be able to get into those fighting poses.
Yes.
Which I think as well, like as an actor, like having that, knowing that you're going to be up 10 feet in the air or however high, but then also you will need to perform what you need to perform of the action, which I think is probably an art in itself because there's so much going on. But I think you touched a point as well where when, say, with one of the actors, they it wasn't that they weren't comfortable, but there was like I think it just needed to take some time to sort of get into it. When it comes to stunt work, how do you go about getting an actor sort of out of their shell, making them comfortable with what they're doing, but also making sure what you guys are doing is safe?
Yeah, it's a great question. Nida had me with each of the actresses when we were at Focus Features upstairs in a beautiful room where I took focus mitts for boxing, kick bags for kicking, sticks, knives, and I had about 45 minutes to an hour with each of the actresses. And then I came back to Nida and gave a feedback on every single one. And we were just blessed. I mean, oh, except for Nimra, I think she was abroad. She was on the Marvel films. That was right. She came in later after the Marvel film. And I had Ritu and I had Priya and I had Shona. And we were blessed. I mean, they were all fantastic. I videoed all the work I did with them. Priya was absolutely outstanding in that she would take anything on, not to take anything away from Ritu and Shona, but Priya was incredible. And as time went by, as we were starting to map these fights out, and we were saying things like, well, this is a difficult piece here. Erin can double you here on this. And Priya was very often saying, well, no, I'll try that as well. And we just passed more and more and more over to her. And it was weird how this mentality of being a stunt woman in the actual film itself, her profile, she was putting into practice, which was crazy, really. She was wanting to take so much stuff on. And the wire work was a joy as well. She wanted to take so much on. And to touch briefly with what you said about Nimra and the dress and what you're wearing, I mean, she had 3-inch heels, pink shoes, and she had to land in a Matrix type pose at the end of that gigantic leap. And that was, like you said, it was a massive thing. You don't think of these things when you're writing the scenes. And we had Guillemard to pull back on. She has done everything in film. She's incredible. What she hasn't done in film isn't worth knowing. And we had her to fall back on, but Nimra, bless her, she did it with those heels on and that massive cloak, and it just worked to a T, really.
Surely, like with her landing in those heels, like that again, that must have been a sort of like, wow, seeing that for the first time. It's like that must be a really badass moment that someone could just be able to land that. But then also, if you see it in a fight, then it's like, what's going to stop them
Exactly.
from beating you
Exactly.
if they can do that? But as well, like with the film focusing on someone who wants to be a stunt woman. When you were reading the script, did you ever see a part of yourself in it as well? Just because when you were growing up, you probably wanted to do, you were getting into your martial arts, but then moving over to being a stunt man. Did you ever sort of take away anything from that story as well?
To be honest with you, I've devoted much of my life to traveling. I've taught around the world quite a bit, 4 different countries, and trained many martial arts. But the stunt side of things, especially being not 21 anymore, obviously, I see the punishment they take. I took a lot of punishment when I fought in Thai boxing and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, judo, etc., and karate. You know, fighting in championships, you have enough grief in that. The stunt work and the stunt world is a different sort of mentality, although they've got martial arts training as such. But it's more like smashing into things, falling on concrete, obviously with protection on, etc. But it's never really appealed to me. And I know it's a full-time thing. Obviously, you have to go into all these disciplines. Adam, who portrayed Magnus in the dojo fight, he's a good friend. He was my assistant that across that period, and I've been training with him in weapons for many years. And when Nida was looking for an actor, I said, "Well, why don't we audition, or could you audition Adam?" And they did, and they loved him, so he was in it. But he's a trainee. The funny thing is, he's a trainee stuntman himself. He's about 2 years off, and he's a full stuntman. So he was traveling a very similar path to the story. But to answer your question, Rob, it's not appealed to me because you've got to go into it full time. And I was coaching martial arts full time. I've run many martial arts academies, taught all over, and I just don't have the time to go into stunts as deeply and as fully as you would need to. Maybe if I was born again, I'd pursue it because it's fun. and it's a great thing. I'm not great on heights. I used to be, but I'm not brilliant on heights. So, I mean, they have to jump off some buildings and hang out of helicopters. I wouldn't be the front of the queue, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, I can totally agree on the heights thing, just because it's I know there's somebody looking after you, but at the same time, jumping from such a height or from a collapsing building or helicopters you mentioned is might not be, might not be my ideal job. Maybe I'll stick to being behind a desk. Uh,
Well, the funny thing is, I love challenges. So in the last 10 years, I thought, right, I'm getting a bit paranoid about heights. So I signed up to jump out of a plane, and I did a skydive, and it was terrifying. And then a year later, I couldn't believe I'd done it. So I did it again. Then I went on the biggest roller coasters in the world. Then I've flown a plane. So I'm a bit crazy. So I think if I was born again, I could probably be a stunt man. I'd have to push myself off that building, but there it is. It's not my favorite thing. I will always step back and let somebody else do it.
well, I think I might take a leaf from your book and book jump out of a plane just to get over it. And
Yeah, just to say you've done it, put it on a bucket list. It was incredible.
even if I have my eyes closed the whole time, I think it'll still count, right?
Yeah, for sure.
um, there's something as well that sorry, that I missed from a little bit earlier that I would like to ask as well, is that you were mentioning about working. I know I mentioned about working with actors and making sure that it's all safe, but what about the case if actors have little experience in stunts and fighting,
Yes.
compared to somebody else who might have a lot more? How do you make sure that you get the actors to a same level, to make sure that it's kind of going to be an even keel when you get onto set?
Yeah, it's a good question. What happens is it's all down to the amount of rehearsal time we can get. That's always a big question when we sat around the table with directors and producers. How much rehearsal time will you give me with the actors and actresses? And obviously, the more the better. And really, we were in a very good position where we had quite a bit of time, probably 4 weeks, 5 weeks. But obviously, it's not every day because they're going away and doing acting scenes and rehearsing. So really, the safety elements in the fighting, if you want to sort of imagine how we're building, we have Adam and myself building a fight, say the sisters fight. We go through the moves. The two actresses will stand by the side of us and they'll copy those moves. We will make it very, very clear that all the punches are stopping at least 8 inches from the face for the camera to cheat it. And then if there's a strike across the face, there's again this 8 inch gap. And we give them plenty of time to rehearse and just see what the end product looks like. And then slowly build them, come away from that scene after a few hours, and then slowly build them on their power so that the camera believes or the audience believes they can really kick, they can really punch. And that calls on focus mitt work like boxing, kick bag work, grabbing and trapping and holding and being physically in the moment, and they watch. I mean, actors, as you know, actors and actresses are absolutely phenomenal at watching how you move and how you perform. So almost like as a fight choreographer and Adam as a trainee stuntman, you have to act the brutality of the scene as well. So you have to lift your game, and then they put their own elements in as well, which is absolutely fantastic. I get chills at the back of my spine when we stand behind the monitor and watch them act the scenes. It's incredible what they bring to the fight as well, in the nuances of the face, their body positioning, the way I was just gobsmacked throughout when I saw the process, and I have been in many, many films seeing this. But really, it's just a case of building them very, very safely. I have heard some nightmare stories where other people have been had near misses. They've had a punch in the face that's bloodied their nose. They were very lucky not to have their nose broken. I won't mention the films, but there are some horror stories. But you only do as you know correctly. And Crispin has 100% belief in me, as I do him. And you just keep actors and actresses mega, mega safe. And if there's anything they're really a little bit frightened of, we'll just say, right, that's a part where we can put the double in, the two doubles in, or a double and actress, and do it. But fortunately, we didn't have that hardly at all.
I guess as well, if people are not used to sort of fight work and whatnot, I think as well, you're saying that like even though you're throwing the punch and it's going to be 8 inches away from someone's face,
Yes,
I guess as a natural instinct, it's always going to be like to flinch or put your hand up a little bit.
exactly.
But I guess it's also, as you said, that when you're playing these scenes out and you have actors sort of watching you like demonstrate what they need to do. I think it helps as well knowing that like that people are going to be in a hyper focus sort of moment of like watching what you're doing and then sort of just repeating it in a sort of in a safe manner. But then also I think as well as like an actor, if you are really into it, I think you will just zone in and then be a sponge on how to make it work and how it's going to look.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The we're lucky in that a lot of actors and actresses have some stage combat anyway. They've done several months of stage combat with swords and a bit of punching and kicking. So they've got sort of base movements. It's just the whole thing and the whole issue with a film like this with so many fights, especially for Priya, because she had to do all of them, is that they change their style, they change the way they move, the intensity of what they're trying to do in that particular moment. But a lot of it's acting pieces. If you don't act it and you just do the punches and kicks, obviously it looks naff. But they just bring their acting skills, which are phenomenal. Ritu had got previous experience on the Umbrella Academy, so she had lots of elements she wanted to put in herself, which was we they chopped quite a few actually. She's going to do a spin on the floor to spin up and stand up. We trained that for quite a bit, but we never pulled that off. That never went in. And Shona had little bits of stage combat, I think, but she was a tremendous presence anyway. She's a very tall girl, very powerful. We didn't have to, because she was portraying a bully, we didn't have to work a great deal on power and stuff like that. She was smashing Adam in the rehearsal room all over the place, which was great to see. I was quite pleased with that. But Serafina and Ella, they took on the wedding fight scene with the trays. We thought, wouldn't it be great that they can use something to escape this wedding, this horror? And they used the trays to smash people, and all hell break loose on that wedding scene. I must say, we really enjoyed putting all that together as well as the mean ladies scene where they all circle them and say, "How dare you?" And then the two sisters are back to back and fighting. We had so much fun with that as well.
It's okay. I think the Mean Sisters scene, not Mean Sisters, the Mean Women scene where
Yeah.
they're back to back is actually a pretty badass moment because it's just that sort of realization of we need to get out of here, and then on top of that, Ria and Lena are sort of back together, as a force rather
Yes.
than against each other, and that is a cool moment, and it's also just the camera work that they're sort of going around them as in a circle rather than letting the scene play out.
Yeah, you're right. And what a lot of people don't realize on that, we had very little rehearsal time with those mean ladies. That was we spent so much time on the main big fights and with Priya, etc. That when we got to that, there was some rehearsal time, but it wasn't. We could have done with it a lot more, really. So when we put it together, the mean ladies had very very little knowledge of any training whatsoever. So with them spinning off, they took a kick, and we spent a ton of time trying to get them to just spin away because we knew it wasn't in Crispin's eyes and my eyes a great piece from them. But funny enough, with the costumes and with the spinning of the camera and the way the camera was thrown into that action, it all worked. So I remember watching some takes of that and thinking, "Oh my God, this is working!" And these girls, the punch would come, and the punch would come, and they'd go after. So I got no hair, but if I had a hair, I would be tearing it out because their reactions were not the best. Shall I say, in a respectful way, not the best. But bless them, they did the best they could. But the camera work, Ashley did fantastic with that, and it sold, I do believe.
Just to wrap up the episode, what was your favorite fight to choreograph?
Wow, that's a difficult one because I love them all.
It's like picking your favorite child, I guess.
Wow, yeah, exactly. How the hell? I think probably the Nimra. because we had some issues there with her fearing the height and not feeling confident with the striking and stuff, and just slowly, it was a very slow burn across weeks and weeks and weeks, whereas the other fights were coming together quite nicely and quite, I found, not, I wouldn't say easy to do, but the Nimra had a great deal of satisfaction seeing her pull that off. So that would answer that question, I would hope.
Okay, so that's I thought you would spend a bit more time umming and ahhing,
Well,
but no, I'll take that. Rob, thank you very much for joining me today.
pleasure.
Polite Society, I think, is still in the cinema as of this recording, but I'm sure we'll hit VOD soon for everyone to go out and watch it. Thank you very much, and you take care.
Pleasure. You take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Rob.
Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast.